CGB, welcome back to the channel. Once again, you have been such a treat, and the Yu-Gi-Oh community has welcomed you with open arms. I think they're really trying to convert you to play our game at the end of it all. So how are you feeling about Yu-Gi-Oh so far?
Well, you know what another word for a treat is? A snack. And I haven't been called a snack in a while, so I'm feeling great today.
So today we have, I think you're going to feel right at home in today's video. So from you and I, the short time that we've known one another, I've gotten to learn a lot about you. And I've learned that you really love your toxic cards. I know you love toying with the opponent. You love seeing them miserable. And so today I am going to be showing you some of Yu-Gi-Oh's most toxic cards, or not. I might be messing with you. There might be a few things in here to throw you off. And your goal today is to evaluate the card, of course, but also to determine at any point if these cards ever saw time on the ban list. What do you think about that?
I think that you're taking your best shot at converting me, and I'll tell you, it probably won't work, but I'm open-minded.
Well, we'll see what happens when I show you your first card. Give this one a read.
Vengeful Bog Spirit. This is a magic card. I can't every time I read it. Okay, it's a magic card, and it says, all monsters on the field cannot attack in the same turn that they are summoned. Includes flip, summon, and special summon.
It's summoning sickness! You know summoning sickness!
I was gonna say, isn't this just good, honest card gaming? Do people get upset about this? Okay, that
well, you have to think by Yu-Gi-Oh standards. Remember, Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have summoning sickness, right? So if you take the expectation that players understand a game, and now you say all of a sudden, you can't just go face with everything, just, you know, wham, bam, I'm going to win the game immediately, and we have to actually play a game. Is that toxic, you know, by Yu-Gi-Oh player standards? You tell us. You tell us.
There's something I know about human beings. It's that when you give them something and then take it away, they are so much angrier than if they never had it in the first place. This reads like an absolute nothing to me, but I bet to Yu-Gi-Oh players this is hell on earth. Like, why would you do this? Who would do such a thing? And this is free?
It is. It's free. It's free.
All right, all right.
Free.
So help me out here. Can I play my thing, punch the opponent, and then play this thing?
Does it say you can't?
No. Oh, it's so rude. Oh, ooh. See, but there's nothing wrong with making people actually have to plot their plays for a turn before get their punchies. There's nothing wrong with that. I play a game where that's normal. That we're just feeling each other out, getting to know each other, spending quality time together, understanding what each other's decks do so we can make strategical decisions. Did this have to be banned? Oh, man.
I don't know. You tell me.
Oh, man.
Me.
So I've got to figure out how good this is. Like,
what about the reverse? Like, how good is haste in Magic? Right? That's just like the opposite.
Good. Haste is grossly good. Okay. It's a grossly good effect. Absolutely. Haste is a banger ability, but aggro mages use it, so I hate it. But would I play an enchantment that, like, say that, okay, mono red is a deck in Magic, very aggressive. It's the most aggressive deck in the format. And every creature they played in the last format, before rotation, the latest one, had haste. Every creature. Would I play a card? Would I use a slot in my deck to play a card that took away their haste? So, does that apply to Yu-Gi-Oh?
One thing you're overlooking, it's free.
God, it is free. So, I think what makes me the most bullish on this card, what makes me think this card is really good, is the pattern of I play my critter, maybe I'm a total badass and I special summon something, I go punch your face really good, then I play this. Now you were reliant on your creature to smash into my creature, but now you don't have that option, so you play your dork, you look at your hand as two other creatures and some irrelevant spell and you pass, and then I get to smash with my creature again before it would normally be already dead or something like that. I'm not sure how common of a pattern that is. I'm not sure how many. I mean, I've seen some of the trap cards and things that do catch creatures. This doesn't really do anything about that. This is really tough because it does feel like it fundamentally takes away something core in the game. So I'm sure it upsets people. I have trouble understanding if it would need to be banned, because to me it does not. To me, I've dealt with a lot of stacks pieces, like creatures enter the battlefield tapped. There's one called Blind Obedience that's really good that we play in Commander. So oh God, I'm going to say people hate this card, but did it need to be banned? If you could have 3 of these and then you can play it over and over, maybe if there was a way to, if there's a way to like pick it up or destroy it on your turn, do the thing, smash, play it again. No, it's getting too Disneyland. Look, you're going to tell me this was banned and that I'm absolutely insane. I'm going to say this wasn't banned.
Final answer.
Yeah, final answer.
Well, you are correct. This card has never been banned. In fact, Vengeful Bog Spirit sucks. This card is terrible. I don't want to say it's terrible. In early Yu-Gi-Oh, this is an old card, hence why it says Magic card still before they had to get in the lawsuit. But it is a card that, in the early days, if you were playing a slow control deck, maybe a burn deck even, that didn't even care about having monsters on the field, Vengeful Bog Spirit may have been a card very early on that people looked to potentially slow the game down enough so that people just can't play a bunch of cards and just kill them, so that way they have enough time to draw the game out long enough so that they can burn them to death or, you know, establish whatever win condition that it is. Aside from extremely early on in Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan, this card has basically never seen play, and it's absolutely terrible. So you almost talked yourself into thinking this card is good. So that was very funny. I was losing my mind. I was losing my mind. All right, so I started you off easy. That's
a close one. Okay.
Let's see what you think about this card.
Dimension Shifter. Whoa. It's a must have been pretty cool in the anime when this showed up.
I don't think it was ever in the anime, but...
Wait, then what's the point of this? I thought the whole thing was like based on the... Anyway, I don't know. Is it like a manga? It went its own way eventually? I don't know.
So it's a long story. Just read the card. We don't have time to cover that today.
Okay. Level 6 monster with 1200 attack and 2200 defense. Big booty. If you have no cards in your graveyard, you get a quick effect, which is you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, and until the end of your next turn, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead.
So for some context here, what quick effect means is it's an effect that you can use at instant speed at any point, as long as you have the ability or the window to be able to do that.
Okay, and banished is exiled?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
Just gone, cannot come back. Have they messed with that? Can things come back, actually?
Yeah, things can come back from exile,
they can't
although
help
it is...
themselves.
They can't. They can't.
Just have us tear it into little pieces. Then it can't come back. That's what it's going to take. Anyway. Okay. Focus. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard if you have no cards in your graveyard. And then until the end of the next turn, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. How good is that?
Is there anything like this in Magic? Any analogs?
Yeah, there's plenty of... There's nothing that I can think of where it's like if you have no other cards in your hand except for this. Or no, it's no cards in the graveyard. Yeah, I can't think of a card that's like if you have no graveyard, play this for free. But, I mean, it's not even playing it for free. It's sending it... It's discarding it to get an effect until the end of the next turn. Okay, till the end of the opponent's turn. So no, not really. The closest I can come up with is like an enchantment that you can play for free if it's in your opening hand, and any cards that go to the graveyard during the game get banished.
Oh, because it stays in play.
Because it stays on the field, which I guess sounds potentially better than this, but it also means like maybe like sometimes you want access to a graveyard later. I think it's only the opponent's graveyard too. I'm thinking of a Leyline of the Void if editor or you want to put it on screen. I think that's the closest thing I've got here. That card definitely has a role. That card is very good and very important in older formats. And the reason is because in older formats, the amount of synergies they've printed of things that like get free value out of their graveyard is insane. And it's the only way to stop these degenerate monsters who just want to fiddle with their graveyard at every tournament. You've given me a few hints. We've definitely talked about the graveyard is a resource in the past video. I caught that. I remember that, although I haven't seen a lot of examples. It's also an eternal format. It doesn't rotate. And that is, eternal formats are where Leyline of the Void and Graveyard Hate, as they say, is really important in Magic. So if those parallels exist, this card seems potentially important. If the opponent is using any kind of a graveyard combo to gain an overwhelming advantage or TKO the opponent, this buys you a turn. It's narrow, but with everything being free, you should be able to get this effect, right? You just play out your thing, play out your thing, play out your thing, play out your thing, discard this. Now you don't get access to your graveyard for a turn, so I'm probably going to get another chance to kill you if your deck relied on that. Did this have to be... So it seems like a limited use... It seems like another kind of check on the format, although I honestly don't know how powerful what I'm talking about is. So that's going to be a big factor here that I don't understand. So when evaluating this, it seems like an important check, an important safety measure to make sure that they can print absolutely busted graveyard stuff, and there's still the potential for you to run Dimension Shifter and get them. Did it ever have to be banned? I think it would be so weird if a card like this had to be banned. This is the kind of card that keeps other cards from having to be banned, in theory, so that they can, like I said, print the busted stuff for the graveyard. So I'm going to say this is... I don't know if this is good or not. It's really hard for me to say how good it is because I don't understand the deck that it is trying to counter. But if that deck exists, this card is good, and I don't think it should be banned unless they wanted that deck to be good. Oh, did they want that deck to be good? Hold on. But if they printed enough stuff, enough people like the graveyard shenanigans, maybe this did have to be banned. Maybe they're like, it takes away too much. They could always print a lighter version of this. They could always print something that isn't quite as good and quite as free. Oh, now you've got me. Because if the graveyard thing is something people actually like, then they probably did ban this because it was hosing them too hard. Oh, so this is a coin flip. This is about what Yu-Gi-Oh players like. That's the new factor. What do Yu-Gi-Oh players like? God, get in the comments, let me know. But I'm gonna err on the side of degeneracy. You guys are degenerates. And this card had to be banned to appease the masses. Final answer. Let's go with it. This card got banned.
So Dimension Shifter is actually a newer card. This is part of a trio of cards that was released in what we have are tins. The tins are something that are released every year. The tins usually contain sets of promos. And the promos for this particular year, it was in 2019, as you can see where it says TN19 down there underneath the photo. This was one of the 3 promos for that specific year. Dimensional Shifter, alongside 2 other cards, were specifically created by the TCG. So we actually got these first here in the States before the Asian territories got them. These 3 cards were specifically designed to help players going second to have more options dealing with what the opponents might be doing during their first turn. And Dimension Shifter was actually considered the worst of the 3. It was considered the most narrow. It was considered... a really high-risk card, because if you don't see this in your opening hand, so it's interesting you brought up that Leyline of the Void card you mentioned. If you don't see this in your opening hand, it's basically unplayable, and it's just going to become a dead card. But if you do see it in your opening hand, you get this really powerful way to interact with the opponent, especially if they are playing graveyard-based decks. Fast forward a few years, and this has now become one of the most hated cards in the game, because essentially the play pattern is with this card, if you're playing a graveyard-based deck, and the opponent opens Dimension Shifter, they will shifter you, and now you cannot play the game. You're going to basically pass the turn, and now your opponent's just probably going to win because they just essentially turn skipped you. And as a result of that, this is a play pattern that a lot of people are not fond of. A lot of people hate this card, but it is not banned. It is still legal, and is a card that people are crying out wishing got banned because it is incredibly toxic and incredibly annoying to play against.
Manifesting into the universe, this gets banned before this video goes live. Please, God.
We just had a ban list, so that's not happening. There's no shot.
Give me one more. Give me one more rotation.
Oh, do you have any other thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that? Or do you think that's misguided?
Do I think that's misguided? I mean, I guess I still don't understand how popular graveyard decks are, and are they generally fair in the format? Are they like, Because in Magic, when a graveyard deck
Sure.
goes too far, it's busted and it's the toxic problem.
Yu-Gi-Oh! The graveyard a lot of the times is considered a second hand. And when it comes to that, there have been really popular decks. Arguably one of the strongest Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks in all of history was a deck that played from the graveyard. And this was a card that people used to check that deck. Now, the thing was, that deck in particular, Tearlament, that deck was actually very interactive. It was a tier 0 format, so like it was the best deck to be playing. No one wanted to play anything else, but the deck itself was very interactive. The problem was it prevented like any other deck from being conceivably playable because it was like 2 tiers above everything else, and
Yikes.
it wasn't even close. Dimension Shifter was one of the best cards to play in an anti-meta strategy to combat Tearlament, but the problem was people really hated this because, yes, it beat Tearlament in theory, but the problem was it beat it in a way that wasn't really, like, healthy or fun or interactive. It's like, oh, you opened Dimension Shifter, or you did something else unfair besides Dimension Shifter. Great, you won just because of that. And, like, you could argue that's part of the game. I think people just prefer to have more ways to interact with the opponent than just completely shutting them out from playing. And Dimension Shifter doesn't enable that. You might disagree with that. I hear you laughing.
Oh, I just think it's kind of funny that they're like, I want to play my deck. I want to play my tier 0 deck. I'm very unhappy. Look at your 0 skill card beating my tier 0 net deck.
Oh, I can't wait to hear the comments response to that one. That's going to be good. All right, so you're 1 for 1. You're doing okay. You're doing okay. Let me know what you think about this card.
Anti-spell fragrance. Okay, look at this little grin. Look at this. Look at this grin. Oh my god. All right. Trap card. Both players must set spell cards before activating them and cannot activate them until their next turn. Both players must set spell cards before activating them and cannot activate them until their next turn. So you would play your spell card. It wouldn't do anything until your next turn. It's like summoning sickness for spells.
So it essentially turns your spell cards into trap cards. So how this would work is you would set this card face down. You would probably immediately flip this card up just to prevent your opponent from immediately activating any spell cards. And now, instead of people being able to just activate spell cards at will, they have to set them face down for a turn like trap cards. Then once the turn cycles back around to them, they are then allowed to play those set spell cards that they set.
Spell cards can be played on the opponent's turn?
Only quick play spells
Only quick play
are
spells,
allowed to.
but some can.
Correct. But those can't be used still until the turn cycles completely back to you.
Oh, God. Is this good? I don't know. I haven't seen that many spells. Is the Vengeful
You've
Bog
seen a few.
Spirit
You've
a
seen,
spell?
You've seen,
No?
Yes.
Yes?
Vengeful Bog Spirit's a spell.
It's a spell. So
Yes.
if I cast this Vengeful Bog Spirit and this trap card were face up, then I would be playing this face down, and I'd have to wait a turn before I could turn it face up, so it would be a turn before it could have its effect.
Correct. Or think you've seen Pot of Greed. So if Anti-Spell Fragrance is up, you're not allowed to activate Pot of Greed. You have to set it for a turn. The turn cycles all the way back around to you, and then on that next turn, you could flip up the Pot of Greed and activate it.
So it is like summoning sickness for spells, or kind of like
Essentially.
Suspend
Sure.
for a spell, maybe.
I don't know what that means, but sure.
Interesting. So, I'm guessing similar to Magic, there are decks that are going to be like Creature Punch Face, and then there are going to be decks that are like lots of spells and try to manage and play a different kind of game. And I bet those decks hate this card. What if your deck has a lot of Punchy Face and you play this and not many other spells? I bet they really hate that. That sounds so mean. Yeah, like you can put this in your deck and you can build in a way that doesn't lean on those spells, and then the opponent has to play into that. I just don't know how common those spell decks are. Okay, if you put a trap card down, that's a spell, isn't it? Or is it something totally different? Is a trap card
So
a
if you
spell?
put a trap card face down, when you set a card face down into your 5 allotted spell and trap zones, it's considered a spell or a trap.
Okay. Can you play a face down trap card and then activate it on the opponent's next turn with this card on the battlefield, or do you have to wait another turn?
No, it's just this only affects spell cards. Trap cards are still
okay. They're still
game.
A different thing. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So traps are game on. Monsters are game on. I imagine the spell mages hate this. I can't imagine trying to play one of my control decks, trying to play a removal spell or a board wipe effect, and then not get it for another turn and have to get my face kicked in again. That sounds like absolute hell. That sounds so bad.
That's why this is the most toxic video.
Yeah, I don't like you. Oh, that face. I don't like you. Ban it. Ban this card. Would they ban it? So a lot of these conversations, like, they come back to who's the good guy. In Eternal formats, especially what I understand of Eternal formats back in Magic is the more spells are printed, the more common it can be to get away from what makes the game fun, which is big creature punch you in face. Like, a lot of people understand that, where they don't understand chaining together spells or locking the opponent out of doing things with spells, and they want to keep punching face good. They want, like we talked about, they want Blue Eyes White Dragon to be punching people in 2024. They want Blue Eyes White Dragon to punch people in 2030. You know, that is how they sell and continue selling the set. This seems like a good guy card from that perspective in an Eternal format to keep spell-based decks from going too crazy. Given that they didn't ban the Graveyard Hate card yet, people want it banned, but they didn't ban it, would they ban this? I don't think so. This seems like it's supposed to be the good guy card. God, I want this banned. I do. I'm gonna say, though, they don't ban this until that keeps creatures relevant. So I'm gonna say not banned.
Final answer.
Final answer.
So Anti-Spell Fragrance is also an incredibly old card. And it's a card that very early on, basically no one cared about this card in the slightest. It just wasn't worth your time to play this. As Yu-Gi-Oh! Progressed and aged, people looked to Anti-Spell Fragrance for numerous unfair things. As the game aged, monsters and spells became the forefront of the game. Trap cards kind of took a back seat and played a more secondary role, just because the fact that you have to set a trap card face down for a turn before you have the chance to activate it means that there's less plays you can make in your turn. And as a result of that, people want to, during their turn, be able to accomplish as much as possible. So trap cards, as a result, sort of got relegated to like the side deck or were played in very limited capacity. And that's even still true to this very day, unless you're playing a deck that specifically gets, a lot of advantage through playing trap cards. There are trap-focused decks, like you mentioned how there are spell-focused decks as such. So Anti-Spell Fragrance immediately became a way that a lot of people figured out, oh, we can use this to do a lot of unfair and unfun things. So, for instance, as you're playing the game, you could go first. You can activate all of your spell cards, do whatever you want with your monsters, then set Anti-Spell Fragrance face down. Your opponent's turn starts, you flip Anti-Spell Fragrance. Now, all of a sudden, all of the spell cards in their hand, if they have 2, 3, maybe even 4, they have an opening hand of 6 after they draw for turn. Now, all of a sudden, you've shut off about roughly half of their hand, and they have to set those cards face down before they can even be activated. Setting the cards face down means they are actually very vulnerable to a lot of different types of removal, which means that Anti-Spell Fragrance is effectively a way to destroy those cards entirely if the player playing it has a way to capitalize on the fact that the opponent has to set those cards down. It's very good at deterring a lot of the powerful spell cards that you've seen thus far, like, Monster Reborn or Change of Heart, Pot of Greed. Obviously some of these are banned and have been banned for quite a while, but it makes it so that your opponent can't just immediately attack you on the crackback. Like you said, it's like a Vengeful Bog Spirit or Summoning Sickness for spell cards, and that's very good in a game where everything is free. I'm surprised you didn't bring that up. And so this is a card that is not banned, surprisingly enough. Ooh. But it's a card that people really, really want banned because there are other cards that are banned that essentially do a very similar thing to it. I believe it's limited to 1 currently, if my memory serves. And they may as well just ban it because it's just as toxic being at 1, if that's the case. So you got it. It is not banned. It is not banned.
Sweet, sweet, sweet. Yeah, this is a good guy card. They want people punch you in face with monsters. This doesn't hurt monsters.
That they do. That they do. All right, let's see what you think about this card.
Do you want to get demonetized? What is this? It's the final countdown. Hell, oh God, I want to play this no matter what it does, I guess. Just every game.
This seems like a very you card from what I know about you. But go on.
Spell card. Pay 2,000 life points. Okay, 10,000 is your life total?
8,000
is your life total. So pay a quarter of your life points. After 20 turns have passed, after you activated this card, counting the turn you activate this card as the first turn, you win the duel. What? just I can win by just doing nothing?
Now you have to survive.
Is this card bad? God, this card might be bad.
You tell us. You tell us.
This is a me card. But it would be one of those things where I know I'm being stupid, right? No. Come on. You're paying a quarter of your life, and it sounds to me, in Magic, we have 60 card decks. They have a bunch of lands in them. You know, there's a lot of dead draws. It sounds to me, it just feels like the more Yu-Gi-Oh I see, the pressure on each spot is intense. It just feels like it is, especially if card advantage is like Pot of Greed is banned and it's hard to get, right? We've talked about that. Then you are taking a card from your hand. You are giving away a quarter of your life, and then your plan is to not die for 20 turns.
Now, let me clarify one thing. A turn is for each player, not full turn cycle.
Yeah. So, like, on your turn 10, you win. There's no way the average Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel goes to 10 turns, right? I mean, don't answer that, but... No, with everything having haste, with everything being free, and with people hating the cards you've shown me so far, there's no way. I love alternate win cons. I love stupid alternate win cons the best. This strikes me as a full-blown stupid alternate win con. All right? This seems like when you play this, your opponent's eyes are just kind of like light up and you get them. And you have to have it early. If this is like, if you play this on turn 10 already, like you finally draw it and play it, like what are you doing with yourself? You might not even have the life points to pay. Like it just, you draw dead. No. This card's terrible. This card has to be terrible. Maybe there was a deck for it when like something was too good. Like some kind of a nothing can attack ever was too good. Maybe this got some play, but this wouldn't be the card you banned. You would ban the card that made this card good because this card's not good, right? I can't see this card being good, and I love really bad alt win cons. I play them all the time. This seems terrible in Yu-Gi-Oh! This card is terrible. Final answer.
So I'm assuming not banned then if it's terrible.
Nope.
As well. With Final Countdown, you do have to keep in mind, yes, everything is free, everything has haste, but also all the cards that you play to deter your opponent from winning the game are also free. So there are cards that prevent your opponent from attacking that are, you know, continuous type cards. I'm not talking necessarily like the Vengeful Bog Spirit that we saw earlier. You could consider that, but I'm talking about cards that will make it so that they just can't attack, period, for as long as that card remains face up on the field. There are other types of cards, let's say, similar to the Dimension Shifter that I showed you, where you discard them from your hand to the graveyard, and it just skips your opponent's battle phase. So they didn't even get the opportunity to attack you. Or maybe it just negates the attacks of all of your opponent's monsters, for instance. So that effectively turn skips the opponent, since most ways people win in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is through combat damage. Obviously, you have to drain your opponent's life points to 0. There are also plenty of other cards that, you know, when you're playing all these different stall cards, there are also plenty of cards that could arguably get the Final Countdown to your hand. While, yes, draw power does come at a premium, if your win condition is to not necessarily care about your opponent's life points, there might be some other cards that you can play that allow you to find this card faster, or, you know, by means that no other deck would play a card like this, just because there's so many downsides to playing that card in a traditional deck, but in a deck that has an alt win con, you don't care about that, because as long as you see the alt win con, you should win the game in theory. And so, Final Countdown is a card that when your opponent sits across from the table and that card gets activated, you know you are going to be in for one of the most miserable games of your life, because the whole deck is just stall, stun and stall. Make it so that the opponent is not able to do anything, so that you waste 20 minutes of your life waiting for this Final Countdown card to resolve. So as a result, Final Countdown is not banned. You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
Thank God.
I will say, though, this might blow your mind. This card is actually limited to 1, and it's still limited to 1 to this day.
I think that makes sense, though. It's forcing them to play good. You shouldn't play more than 1.
I guess that's fair.
What's the freaking point of, like, if you literally are able to build a deck that can stall as long as necessary, why would you ever want to draw a second one? Ever? No. That's just forcing,
if you need to see it in your
control
opening
mages
hand
to play right.
If you need to see it in your opening hand, there is an argument to want to see multiple copies. But to be fair, there could also be ways to, if you draw multiple copies of this card, you activate the first one, then maybe you can like discard it for a card effect for something else.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? I mean, there's alternate use, but yeah, Final Countdown, it never like saw competitive play, although there have been few instances of it doing like somewhat well at like lower tier tournaments. It's a very funny, very memey card, and that's kind of just where it sits. But it's still limited because we don't really want to have games where nothing's really happening. That's not particularly fun.
Sure, we don't. We don't want that. All right.
No, who would want that? Who would want that?
Okay, you scared me there. You made me think it's like busted or something.
Why would I make you think that? Why would I make you think that? All right, let's show you the next card.
Skill Drain. Pay 1,000 life points. The effects of all face-up effect monsters are negated. The effects of all face-up effect monsters. I need help. I don't know what that means.
So any effect monsters that I've shown you, Dimension Shifter is a poor example because that's a card that doesn't really do anything on the field. It's just meant to be discarded. But think back to some of our previous videos where there is the Morphing Jar, for instance. The card that gets flipped up where you discard your hand and draw 5 cards. That's an effect monster.
Okay.
Any monster that just has any ability, while Skill Drain is face up, the effects of all of these types of monsters that have any ability whatsoever are negated.
Turns face, like if you turn something that has a turn face up ability is negated, something that's an ongoing ability is negated.
Yes, anything that has any ability is negated.
Just basically text box, but stats, like they can still attack.
Correct.
They can still punchy things.
Correct.
God, pay 1,000 life points? Well, obviously they know there's something about that that's good. It's got a heck of a price.
Not as much as Final Countdown.
Correct, but they sure as hell put a cost on something where everything is free.
You said you wanted to see some costs. I'm showing you some costs, CGB.
Yeah. Paying in life points is always interesting because life can certainly be a resource. Any place that the effect is good enough, paying life points doesn't matter if you're winning the game because winning at 1 life is the same as winning at any other number. So I am guessing this is a very mean card. How mean is it?
Is there anything in Magic that just negates all abilities on the field of creatures in Magic?
Yeah, this stays on the... I was going to say, this stays on the board, right?
Correct. It's a continuous trap. You can see the infinity symbol on the top right there.
We have a few cards that take away specific types of abilities. They say activated abilities can't be activated, but that's not like every creature has an activated. There are actives, there are passives, right? There are various different abilities. There are a few things that remove all of it. There is one, I'm thinking of a card called Humility, is toxic as fuck. That card gets people kicked out of their game store. They get to keep their stats. Humility turns everything into a 1/1, which is extra embarrassing.
Okay. So it negates all their effects and they become basically nothing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
There are very good temporary effects like this. There's a card called Dress Down that enters the battlefield and takes away effects of creatures for 1 turn, and that card is surprisingly good.
I will say Yu-Gi-Oh! Also has similar types of cards as well.
But yeah, this thing's staying on the board and shutting things down. I imagine, man, it's tough because you could just play something that like removes or destroys the thing, right? I feel like I've seen that a few times. So
potentially.
You still take punches. But I bet there are a lot of monsters whose whole like value is built into their effect. Would this
again, the Morphing Jar, if you remember. That monster had pretty middling stats, all things considered.
Yep.
But it was for the effect. So yes, there are value creatures, you know, in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Just so I understand the scope, not because I'm saying this happens often, would this keep the Dimension Shifter from being discarded to do that effect?
So the reason for that is because Skill Drain only affects monsters that are on the field. Dimension Shifter activates in the hand because you're discarding it to the graveyard, and so it never actually touches the field, so Skill Drain doesn't interact with it. So hypothetically, you could Dimension Shifter and Skill Drain your opponent if you want to just make their life absolutely miserable.
Okay. Yeah, so like having to ask, it doesn't say like face up effect monsters like on the battlefield, but you know, now you gotta ask.
Yeah, it's a wording thing. I mean, it's face up monsters would imply the monsters are on the field. So it only affects the field. The hand and the graveyard and the banished pile by extension are not.
Can I just say, included. I hate that they have all this extra room to put text in this box and they still won't increase the font. Do they care nothing for us?
No.
Okay. I mean, this is how you end up with glasses that are way, like, insanely strong. I don't know how good this is. It seems good. Effects like this seem good. And the fact that this is ongoing and that you can try to build your deck around it and that can be very painful for the opponent, but is it broken? Did it have to be banned? I get that it's annoying, but did it have to be banned? And if I stick to my theory, which has played out well so far, the cards that hated on spells didn't have to be banned. The card that hated on graveyard didn't have to be banned. This hates on the Blue Eye White Dragon, although, you know, that's not a good example because it punches face. But it hates on really cool effects on really cool monsters. And that, I think, might be where they draw the line. So I'm going to try to keep the theory going that the monsters are the good guys. They want people to play monsters. And this always being legal in an eternal format makes a certain number of monsters less playable, less appealing. I think the pay 1,000 life points is important because it might be a really good limiter on this, but I still think it's possible this was banned at some point. So I'm going to go with that. It's hard to tell how good it is, but I'm going to say that they like their monsters. This enraged too many people. It made monsters less good and they banned it, at least at some point. So I'll go with that.
Final answer.
Yep, final answer.
So I think a lot of your assessment is correct. One thing you might have overlooked is that not only does Skill Drain make a lot of monsters really bad to play, but the inverse is also true, where Skill Drain does make some monsters good to play. There are some monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh!, and I imagine Magic might be similar, that have a really negative downside under normal circumstances. But Skill Drain, for instance, essentially flip that around and now make it a positive. So for instance, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has some cards that say it might have like a Blue Eyes White Dragon's worth of stats, right? It might have 3,000 attack, but it has the ability that says you can normal summon this card without tributing, but its attack becomes 1,000, let's say. With Skill Drain active, you can normal summon that monster, the effect is negated, and now it's back to being a 3,000 attack point monster. So all of a sudden, you now have the ability to just play giant guys to the field for free, and Skill Drain becomes an upside because it's an enabler for your deck, allowing you to do that, where otherwise these cards would basically be unplayable. Skill Drain is a card that over time, that was how Skill Drain was used back in the day. There were a lot of cards like this that Skill Drain essentially made good while simultaneously making it so that your opponent's value cards, you know, such as Morphing Jar, etc., it made them completely useless because now you're just playing a guy that has no stats and my guys are all bigger, so I'm going to win the game. So we called these decks Skill Drain beatdown decks, or like Skill Drain aggro decks, if you will.
Sure.
But over time, Skill Drain became more and more toxic just because the effects of monsters became increasingly more powerful and became increasingly more prolific as more effects were being thrown around every single game. And so anytime Skill Drain got flipped, it was just really frustrating to play against because now it's like, oh, all of a sudden, all my monsters in my deck just don't do anything, and I'm just going to lose because this card gets flipped face up. Similar to what I was explaining with Anti-Spell Fragrance, there is a world where you can play your entire turn out, do everything you want, and then set Skill Drain face down. Your opponent begins to take their turn, and you can just flip Skill Drain in response to them activating an effect. Now, all of a sudden, their entire turn is just going to get skipped because they only have monsters in their hand that have effects that need to be activated on the field, and it's basically just game over. And so, incredibly frustrating card to play against. Everyone can empathize with the face on this card, and that's basically what it feels like when Skill Drain is active. But it is not banned. It has never been banned in the TCG. It's been all over the limited list. It's been at 3, at 1, at 2, and it seems like every list they change where this card is because they just can't make up their mind. It's, I believe, at this exact juncture at 1 copy, but it's still very annoying even just at 1 copy. People just want this card gone just because it's very unhealthy.
Interesting. I'm learning that at least the rules, the people making the bans may have a thicker skin than I expected.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. I think this one might be, I don't know if it's the most interesting, but it'll be interesting to hear your assessment of this one.
Wind Up Hunter. Level 3 monster? It's the smallest monster I feel like I've seen today. Attack is 1600, defense is 500, tiny booty. Whoa, oh, okay. But how big is that? Again, 8,000 is your life?
That's a fifth of your life, 1600.
That's really big.
Remember I told you the baseline for summons of monsters, if you're trying to like attack in for a normal summon as well, baseline is like anywhere from like 1800 to 2000. That's considered like good stats. Okay. So 1600 is fair stats. It's fair.
Well, I guess this is the first I think I've seen of a level 3. Because up to level 4 is free. So why would you play a level 3? I bet if I read the effect, I'll understand more.
Or not.
You contribute 1 face-up wind-up monster, except Wind-Up Hunter. Let me read this again. You contribute 1 face-up wind-up monster, except Wind-Up Hunter. So send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. This effect can only be used once while this card is face-up on the field. So you can sacrifice a wind-up. What is a wind-up monster?
So Wind-Up Hunter is part of the Wind-Up archetype. We call them archetypes. So similar to how Magic has colors, cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially as the game progressed, got grouped into archetypes to incentivize people to play cards in those specific archetypes together. They typically synergize together. So a Wind-Up monster is any monster that has Wind-Up in the name. So for instance, there is Wind-Up Magician, there's Wind-Up Shark, any of these Wind-Up cards, because they're all supposed to be like Wind-Up toys. Any of the cards with Wind-Up in the text box of the title of the card are considered Wind-Up monsters.
And I'm guessing there's a lot of them.
There's enough to build a deck with just those cards, yes.
So they'll probably do a number of things you need your deck to do. So you can sacrifice 1 of these face-up thingy-majiggies to send a random card from hand to graveyard. Is that good? You can play the thing, you can punch the face. I don't know, man. You can't do it. You have to do it with something else that's on the field. If you just play this, you can't do it. That doesn't seem that good. So what we're missing are probably things that you would want to die for whatever reason. Maybe spells that bring them back out of the graveyard to the battlefield so that you do a thing and then get something back right away. And I feel like I'm missing something with this card. It seems like a lot of work to make it happen. Maybe not as much as I think, but you have to have this out and you have to have another thing out. It does some attacky effect. Then you pitch it, you get a random card. How bad is that? There's got to be some synergies. There's got to be something that I'm missing of the thing dies and then you draw, but you also get a random card from the opponent. Some kind of a value thing like that. So if you're doing that, then this card becomes fine. And maybe that's why you'd play like a level 3. But is that still not insane? Like that's obnoxious. And I remember the card I got the most wrong in our first video was that thing that emptied the hand, and you were like, yeah, it's no big deal. The card's terrible. So how good is it to hit a random card giving up your own thing? I'll need my mind blown. I'm seeing this as like in Magic this would be a good card, but just kind of seems slow and unexciting here. Like I could see strategies, sacrifice strategies where you would want to be using this. Wait a minute. How often can you do this? Beast Warrior effect. What does that mean? Every turn you can do this?
Yes. It says, well, actually it says this effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field. So,
okay.
Yes.
But only use it for the whole time?
Yes.
Why did they... Okay, why is this one of the most toxic cards? What is the case where this
I
is
could be
the
baiting
most toxic card? You could be. So
like with Vengeful Bog Spirit, you know?
You could be baiting me. I'm trying to make the other case.
Okay.
And sure. It basically revolves around the thing that you're sacrificing. The thing that you're tributing has to be good for you. The fact that there's a keyword for it, you contribute. This means that you guys all already know what tribute is. The first time I've seen it. But you guys all know what it is. So it's on a bunch of cards, I think. So there's got to be like a tribute
you know what tributing
strategy.
Is.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Is it? That's how you cast like level... Yeah, because that's also how you cast like level 5 and up monsters. That's what you're saying.
Correct, yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
instead of, summoning a monster, you're just sacrificing it to the graveyard to get this effect instead.
I still think it still just feels like you're tying this into what you're tributing and how that's good for you and not bad for you, because it seems very meh. And it can't be this. I mean, this just seems like a role player. I don't think this had to be banned. This doesn't seem broken to me, and I'm confused why it's on the list. So I'm sure there's something I'm missing, maybe a way to like duplicate its effect and really nail their hand. But since the last time I picked a card that made people discard their hand turned out to be bad, and I still think that card looked a little better than this, which I'm probably gonna get roasted for, I'm gonna say this wasn't banned. And I don't think it's that scary.
Final answer?
Yeah.
Oh, CGB. Let's talk about Wind Up Hunter. All right. So, what if I told you that this card could rip every card out of your opponent's hand on the first turn?
Then there's definitely things I'm missing here because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Sure. I think this card's going to teach you a lot about how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has evolved as a game. You obviously know that, you have your normal summon, you get some extra special summons here and there. This card was released, I want to say, early 2010s. I think it's 2010, 2011 era was around when this card was released. And this card enabled what was known as the Wind Up Hunter hand loop. The Wind Up Hunter hand loop. So, how this worked, as you see on the card, it says this effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field. However, now that I think about it, this card was actually released later. This was like mid-2013, I want to say. I think it was 2013, now that I'm thinking about this historically. So how this would work is basically the wind-up archetype was very good at special summoning many monsters to the field. I mentioned cards earlier such as Wind-Up Magician, Wind-Up Shark. These cards have effects that allow them to very easily special summon other wind-up cards to the field. As a result of that, it was very easy for Wind-Up Hunter to have fodder on the field in order to sacrifice to rip a card out of your opponent's hand. From there was an easy loop that the deck had to put the Wind-Up Hunter in the graveyard, and then Wind Up Rat, another accompanying card, was able to resurrect the Wind Up Hunter. And since it was a technically new copy of Wind Up Hunter that hasn't used its effect yet, you could then tribute off another Wind Up card to hit another card out of your opponent's hand. And effectively could repeat this for every single card your opponent has, and then pass the turn to them, and they start the game with one card in hand, and they basically lose the game. As such, this card is very banned, and has been very banned for quite some time, and it is still on the ban list today.
The problem isn't the cards that get it back. The problem is this card. Okay, yeah. I guess this is a rarer effect then. There's a lot of context there I'm missing.
Sure.
I'm like, what? Okay, so I need to sit down and have somebody Wind Up Hunter me down to like one card on turn one so I can really understand everybody's feelings here.
Yeah, just not a very fun card to play against. And I believe they also did ban one of the other pieces for the combo as well. Even without Wind Up Hunter, the deck was still quite good just because it was able to amass a lot of resources very easily. So they, I believe, banned, and it may be limited at this point, but they did ban another piece of that deck as well. So they did ban one of the enablers too. But this, without the Hunter, at least the opponent could play the game, was kind of the theory behind it. So... very, very annoying card to play against. As you know, just having your hand in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so important just because that's our resource. We don't have anything else to work with. And getting hand looped for 5 on the very first turn is not particularly fun.
Was this common? Like, is this
was a common
thing?
This was a common card.
Okay.
Oh, common as in like
in tournament
common
play?
in Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah. Was this
100%.
very doable? Okay. All right.
This was the best thing you could be doing during this time.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, I can see how that could be annoying.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Speaking of which, I talk about how the Wind-Up archetype was so good at special summoning monsters. Only a few cards left. Let's see what you think about this card.
Card's like my horoscope for the day. Vanity's Emptiness. Tramp card. Neither player can special summon monsters. Destroy this card when a card is sent from the deck or the field to your graveyard. Destroy this card when a card is sent from the deck or the field to your graveyard. So if
through your mind.
If the opponent, like if they go to special summon a monster, do you just flip this over and say, no, you can't?
So it depends on how the monster is attempting to be special summoned. Let me try to clarify here. Some monsters have an effect that says that you activate the effect, your opponent has the ability to respond, and then if they don't have a response, you special summon that monster to the field. In that instance, if they activate the effect to special summon that monster, you would flip Vanity's Emptiness in response. The chain resolves backwards. Emptiness is active, so they're not allowed to special summon. They keep the monster in their hand, or graveyard, or wherever they're trying to special summon from. There are other types of monsters that can be special summoned. I believe, if you recall from our very first video, do you remember the Cyber Dragon?
Maybe?
It was a 2100 attack point monster that said if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card.
Oh, yep. Okay, yeah.
So that is not a effect that activates to summon. That is just the condition to which the monster can be summoned. So you can just slap Cyber Dragon down on the field, and there isn't a window to activate Vanity's Emptiness beforehand. Now, you could flip Vanity's Emptiness at the start of your turn to prevent them from special summoning that Cyber Dragon altogether. But you don't get a window to do it in response. So you'd have to decide to do it proactively in that exact scenario.
I have to figure out how important special summoning monsters in that activated way kind of is, or how good this is to play in, I guess, what we'd call more slow motion, where you put this out and then turn it face up so in the future they can't special summon monsters. And then I have to figure out how inconvenient is it to destroy this, because when it goes to the graveyard, it's just bye. But I guess there's a way out too if you need to special summon stuff. Do I stick to the philosophy that
how's that been going?
Cards that screw with your monsters are bad, and cards that screw with your spells are good. It's so hard to understand how big a part of a game that is. Like, there might be whole decks that can't do what they need to do because of this.
Remember in Yu-Gi-Oh, everything's free.
Sending something to the graveyard can't be too hard. Like, any monster that's out there, you can just punch it and it dies. But now I'm starting to learn that there are things to do besides monsters based on today's video, and other ways to get around these things. I mean, it seems like special summoning, it probably has a very big place in the busted things that can happen, and maybe some of the more busted openers. And this is a countermeasure to that thing. It does go away rather easily, but that does mean you can free yourself from it so that you can do monsters, so you can special summons. Dude, I don't know. I'm kind of broken on this one. My brain is like shattered. I'm learning many of the different things that exist in the game, and I'm learning that there is counterplay to it. Counterplay is important for any game to survive, especially one that's an eternal format. So if this is bad, it's probably because there are better ways to achieve it, or because special summon isn't very good. Based on things you've told me, I don't think that's the case. It sounds like it's gotten better in recent years, is the impression I've been getting. So this card probably plays a bigger role. Does that mean they had to ban it to make special summoning monsters that do a million things when they enter even better and better? Maybe, but it's also like the safety valve. You need to be able to have a safety valve so that you can print a bunch of monsters that do better and better and better stuff. So, I mean, it seems like a good card, but it doesn't seem to me like it has to be banned. Maybe if they're really pushing the special summoning thing, but then they can just restrict it, and it sounds like that's been the answer to a bunch of things. So I'm gonna say it is not banned, but it's good. That's my final answer. Yeah, that's my final answer.
So on release, Vanity's Emptiness was really interesting because it's a card that no one really cared about, especially because it had a reciprocal effect that prevented you from also being able to special summon, but also the fact that it just goes away if any of your cards are sent to the graveyard, which means your opponent immediately now gets extra value being able to 1-for-2 any of your cards because the Vanity's Emptiness is going to be taken away with it. Also, in earlier Yu-Gi-Oh!, spell and trap removal was a lot more prominent, I would say, compared to modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, just because traps especially still had a pretty significant role in the game. And it wasn't that difficult to deal with a card like this. And so it actually took a few years passing for people to realize the power and the true potential of this card. Similar to some of the other cards I've talked about in this video, such as Anti-Spell Fragrance and Skill Drain, Vanity's Emptiness is a very unhealthy card because as the player going first, you could do a bunch of things during your turn and then just set Vanity's Emptiness face down. Your opponent starts their turn, you immediately flip Vanity's Emptiness up, and similar to like with Anti-Spell Fragrance, that half of their hand is turned off because half of their hand is spells, the same thing is with Vanity's Emptiness, except with this, it's in the instance of being able to special summon monsters and really do anything to fight back against what your opponent did during their first turn. There were some cards that existed that could protect Vanity's Emptiness, so that way it wasn't able to be destroyed by the downside, and people tried to find ways to lock their opponent with Vanity's Emptiness as a result of that, which made it even more toxic, because then it was really hard to get rid of it at all, if they were even able to in the first place. Sometimes if the opponent opens a hand and they just don't have any way to deal with anything, Vanity's Emptiness is going to stick on the field. And then when your turn would come back around as the turn player with playing with Vanity's Emptiness, you would just attack with all the monsters that you played on your first turn and just kill them. So the game would just be over. So this was essentially an equivalent to a turn skip in Yu-Gi-Oh! More often than not. A very, very just frustrating card to play against. And very, I don't want to say quickly, it actually took quite some time for Vanity's Emptiness to get banned. It went from 3 copies down to 1. It was at 1, which is arguably even more annoying, because if they drew like the 1 copy, then you're just like, oh great, they drew the 1 copy of Emptiness. I just lose the game, and it's a non-game for no reason. And then people were cheering in the streets when this card was finally banned, because this card was so frustrating to play against.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. I have a timing question. You said you can turn it face up at the start of the opponent's turn, so they don't get an opportunity to special summon. You can turn this up before they have that chance.
Correct. You can activate this in their draw phase or their standby phase before they go to their main phase 1, before they have the ability to start playing those cards. So yes.
Okay. Gotta remember that.
And that really adds to the strength of this card, plus several of the other floodgates that we've looked at.
I don't know. Like, the way we talked, I got in my head that they could, like, do, like, whatever that...
Oh, they get an action first?
Yeah. I got in my head that they could have played that special summon, the dragon that you were mentioning, for free.
Would that have altered your decision, though?
Maybe not. Okay,
I'm just curious.
I'm not surprised it's restricted at all. I guess, yeah, it's hard to tell how much it had to be banned, but apparently people hate it, so, okay.
Let me actually think of this card.
It's a Mystic Mine. Look at this art. Look at this cool art. All right, spell card. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack. If you control more monsters than your opponent does, you cannot activate effects or declare an attack. Once per turn during the end phase, if both players control the same number of monsters, destroy this card. So if I just don't play monsters, you're boned? That's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
Is that a viable strategy? Can I run that?
I don't know. Maybe we saw a card earlier in this video that you were ragging on.
Dude, they do not want to encourage this. They don't want to encourage this. Oh, I love this. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, yeah. But is this the problem? Let's see. It's a spell card. Spell card stays on the battlefield. Can you, like, it seems like there are effects out there that destroy spell cards.
Yes. I will give you some context. I don't think I have shown you... I think I showed you in the very first video. This is a field spell. So the field spell is a continuous spell that stays active on the field until something interacts with it, or in this case, it destroys itself potentially. The field spell is a zone that's in the top left corner of the game area. It's just like a card... It's a zone just designated for these types of cards. Back in the old days, if you play, it kind of had a little bit of a legend rule where if you played another field spell, it would destroy my field spell, but they did away with that midway through the game's lifespan. So now it's just like an extra zone to have this special type of card.
This card's great. I love this card. This is just good, fun, honest gaming right here. And I imagine...
Weren't you the one saying that interacting with the opponent is good?
From a game design perspective, there's only one way to play card games. You take all the hard work, research, development, play testing, and effort that a company has put in to making a fun, interactive game, and you break it. That's the only way to do it. And you do it at your friend's expense. And you make them miserable, even though they've tried not to let this happen. They had, there was the one thing they didn't want to happen. You try to make that happen. You just break the game. You make it be exactly what they didn't want it to be. This card is, that. It's a piece of that. And
if there's a card that you ever could have dreamed of making for Yu-Gi-Oh, this is what I imagined it looked like.
They know. Like, they know that there's 10 to 20% of you are sickos like me, and that you don't want to play by their rules. You want to make your own rules. It doesn't help if there are combos or ways to do direct damage, like you said, a burn deck. It does buy time if you are that burn deck. It makes the opponents run things that would destroy this spell card on the field, which I'm not sure how common of an effect that is. I'm also not sure how much you can play cards that protect this or get it back.
I will say that both exist.
It doesn't seem like... So my experience with these type of cards is that they don't have to ban it. They just have to print more ways to remove it. Because it's an ongoing thing on the field, and if you play this and you're expecting it to protect you and they destroy it and then hit your face, oops, get fucked. That's what you get. So I'm gonna say it's not banned. If it is, it's probably because there's so many ways to protect it that opponents literally see this hit the field and look at their opponent's hand or like 2 trap cards down or something and just say, well, forget this. And they flip the table and they baby rage out of the building. And you know what? That's fine with me. So I'm going to say this is a good, fine, healthy card that is not banned.
I can't tell if you're just like fucking with me or not, but I guess we'll find out. I don't think you are, actually. You know, I don't think you are. I mean, if this is like engagement bait for the video, I'm all for it. So let's talk about Mystic Mine. So this is a newer card. Mystic Mine was a card that on release, it's actually exactly as you said. People figured out that, oh, this is an incredibly good stall card for burn decks, because if you're playing a burn deck, you're typically not playing any monsters. They might play like a couple, for instance, like Morphing Jar, just to refuel their hand if they need to. But for the most part, burn decks could get away just fine with playing no monsters. And this was an incentive to not play a single monster, because why would you when you can just stop your opponent from playing the game completely outright? And there are plenty of burn cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Singular burn cards where you'd only need like 1 copy of it, that over time it would deal more and more damage. So it's not like you needed to just see more cards. You just kind of needed to see like the correct cards or the critical massive cards that would just kill them. That was how Mystic Mine started. Now, what happened was, this was a deck that, it wasn't never like the best deck ever. It was really annoying to play against, and as a result, at tournaments, people started to side deck more spell and trap removal to deal with Mystic Mine. The Mystic Mine deck, however, did play cards to protect the Mystic Mine to make it even more difficult for the opponent to out. More often than not, people would only play a couple of cards to deal with Mystic Mine, so as long as the Mystic Mine player had enough of the ways to protect it, then the opponent had outs, then it was basically just the game was locked up. It was over. And to be fair, some people like that. It was kind of cool for, 20 standards for people to say, oh, hey, like a burn deck is viable in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? It's like you said a couple videos back. People just love to hear like mill is viable or burn is viable. I don't know what it is. It's just like it tickles the TCG itch, I suppose. What ended up happening though with Mystic Mine, it was annoying. It was around. It was neither here nor there. What happened though was that good players started to look at Mystic Mine and thought to themselves, well, what we could do is our opponent goes first, they play some monsters, and they just like pass the turn. On our turn, as long as we can make sure that this Mystic Mine is going to resolve, that they don't have any ways to counter it or interact with it to destroy it, at the time, people weren't because the best things you could be doing didn't care about destroying spells and trap cards. People just weren't playing those cards, or if they were in the form of a monster effect to destroy the Mystic Mine, which Mystic Mine would prevent from happening already. These good players figured out, let's just play Mystic Mine. We go second. Not choose to go second, but they have it in their, their hand or deck going second. I'm going to activate Mystic Mine against the opponent. They don't have a single out in their deck, and they're just going to deck out. We're just going to draw pass for 30 turns, and the game is over. And that is when Mystic Mine started to become incredibly toxic, because the game got to a point where it's like, okay, now if my opponent's going to play Mystic Mine against me, I need to have cards in my side deck to board in to be able to deal with the Mystic Mine. And then if I don't, then it's just it was just an absolute mess. And so when that game started, then players had to figure out, okay, I need to find a way to kill the opponent in 3 to 5 turns, just drawing and passing a few turns, getting enough cards in my hand. Okay, I can disable the Mystic Mine myself, and now I can just go and kill you just straight out, just because I have enough gas in my hand to just take you out. As a result, this card was fucking miserable to play against. This card was awful. This is arguably, if there's like a top 3 most toxic cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, this is probably in that list. And it took a while, but finally, This card got banned and has been banned ever since.
Weak. I take back what I said. Weak. Pathetic. Come on, man. There's so many ways to deal with it. Just give your opponent some creatures.
Just because a card has an out doesn't mean that card should be in the game.
Come on. Dig through the binder. There's got to be something back there that gives your opponent like 3 1/1s or like 3 babies or something.
So the Mystic Mine bird deck would give the opponent, like there were monsters that you could give to your opponent to just immediately activate the Mystic Mine.
Dude, get good. That's what I gotta say. Get good. This card is good, awesome, honest gaming.
I thought you were going to do better than Raren on that one, but apparently not. The Yu-Gi-Oh community might want to reject you after your thoughts on that one. But in any case,
if they ever unban this, you're in trouble. I just want you guys to know that. I'm coming for y'all.
You might actually play Yu-Gi-Oh.
All right, Max C. The hell am I looking at? A dresser drawer? What? Level 2. It's a monster, I guess. It's an insect. Okay, it's in there somewhere. Attack 500, defense 200. You can activate this effect during either player's turn by spending this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster, draw 1 card. You can only activate this once per turn.
He got quiet for this one.
What the hell is this? You can discard it. It doesn't have this effect on the field.
It's similar to the Dimension Shifter, where you just discard it from your hand to the graveyard.
If it's on the field, it's just a 500 attack, 200 defense thing that you can play for free. None of this other effect can happen. Like, the whole line is irrelevant if this just is on the field.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So it's basically a spell. It's like a spell in Magic. Just put it on a stack and it goes to the graveyard and get an effect, like channel or cycling. Okay. Each time your opponent special summons a monster, draw 1 card. How many special summons are we doing? The only way this is good is if there are really easy free ways to get it back, like over and over and over, so that you can do this with every single turn. Somebody is taking a turn where they special summon a lot of shit.
Okay.
And then even if they do, I mean, you can draw a lot of cards from that. That's nice, but if they're doing that much stuff and everything has haste, are you just way far behind? I don't get it. Like, this seems so. Why would you show this to me if it were as narrow as it looks? Because it seems like it's just going to be, and I draw 1 card. So there's got to be a way. It's an insect. It's an insect. I'm guessing there might be other insects. What would an insect be like? Would that be the kind of thing that happens over and over? Bugs are persistent. There are a lot of bugs. Spawn and make more bugs. There's lots of them. So maybe like there are ways to make like several copies of insects in your hand so that you discard like multiples of these and you draw a bunch of cards. Okay, so if you have like 3 of these in your hand and you discard all of them and they special summon 2 things and you draw 6 and now we're cooking. And I don't know, man. This is so ridiculous. How do you break this? How do you break this?
Well, I don't want to put a hole in your plan, but you can only activate 1 Max C per turn. So
only 1. Wait, if you have multiples of this, you can still only do 1?
Correct, because the card says you can only activate it once per turn.
So this is potentially awesome if there are significant portions of the meta doing a lot of special summoning, but then it is just kind of a punish measure. It doesn't stop them from doing the thing. So the only thing I can think is if there is like a free way, like a lot of cards that just return this to your hand so that you can do this every single time with the same Max C. Like a free way of getting it back and just making it accumulate resources over time. That's the only thing I can see. I don't know if that exists. If it does, this card is probably cooking, and if it doesn't, I'm looking at a bad card, because this is narrow in a lot of ways that it doesn't seem like it's generically good. It's not generically terrible. I bet you can like draw a card off this every game, and then if you're in the right matchup, maybe you can draw multiples. Maybe that's good enough to play on its own, but I would hope there are better uses for a slot in Yu-Gi-Oh! An Eternal format than maybe I'll draw 2 off this sometimes. You said card draw is kind of a premium, so maybe it's better than I think it is, and maybe special summons are more common than their name would indicate. I don't think this would be banned, though. It's draw a bunch of cards. Like, and that's if the opponent plays into it, you know? You're gonna, like, why would you show this to me if it weren't banned and there weren't some funny loop that's making you laugh your ass off at me right now? But I don't see it.
I don't know what you're talking about. You're assuming that's what I'm doing. You're assuming that's what I'm doing.
It's that, or you're just testing reading comprehension, of which I have little anyway.
Hey, I do too. I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh player. So.
I don't like evaluating this one. I don't feel like I can win no matter what. I feel like I'm just gonna find out. I'm gonna learn something anyway. So let me get right to it. This card wasn't banned. No. This card's not banned.
Where are you at on how good or bad this card is?
It's contextual. It's
in a vacuum. I know it's contextual.
I'm going to learn something important. No matter what, at the end of this, which is how often and how many special summons happen, Vanity Express here, Vanity's Emptiness got banned, which tells me at least something about that. They ban a card that said, no, you can't do this. Would they need to ban a card that says, I draw a bunch of cards if you do this? Also, like, you're kind of in some level of control. My understanding is if they cycle, if they send this to the graveyard and you're like, you look at your hand and you're like, well, maybe I don't play all 4 special summons, but I'll play 1 and it's not that bad. Like, how screwed are you waiting a turn to do that? So that's why I said getting this back and like doing it multiple times is the busto. But I don't know if that's even reasonable.
You think this card's like mid?
It's definitely good. Like, it has the potential to be very good.
Okay.
It has the potential to be very good. I'm going to learn a lot about the circumstances of your game, and that's going to inform a lot of this. This has the potential to be absolutely busted if an effect that says draw a card whenever an opponent does a thing that is a game mechanic, if it is something that happens all the time, if there were a card in Magic that said draw a card every time they untap a permanent, that would be busted. You know? So it's like this.
So Magic doesn't have cards like this, is what you're saying.
They have things that let you draw a card when people cast a spell, but there's usually a way out of it or around it, like paying a cost, of which you don't have many.
Fair point. I'm curious. Okay. All right. So Maxi. You said earlier, I noticed you said something without realizing how funny it was at the time. You said how you feel like you can't win either way. And that is the dilemma that Maxi presents upon the player. Similar to a lot of cards we've discussed in this video, Maxi is interesting because it's a card that on its initial release was pretty innocuous and like it was considered a fine card, but it was nothing that people were just like flocking to as like, this is the best card in the set by far. Maybe the most divisive card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! The reason for that is special summoning, as the name would not suggest, is actually way more important to the game than normal summoning. And especially since you could do it as many times as possible. You would think that they would call that normal summoning and they call the normal summon special summon. But we're not here to argue about semantics. So when it comes to Maxi, here's the dilemma you're basically faced with. And this might give you some context. So recall back to the example that I was describing with the Wind-Up Hunter and how the Wind-Up deck in particular is able to special summon a bunch of cards and then ultimately rip all those cards out of your hand, right? Well, in theory, Maxi would be a great way to counteract that because now they're going to be drawing cards to essentially counteract the fact that the Wind-Up Hunter would be ripping cards out of their hand. So, like, you look at it that way and it's like, okay, that could be like a healthy application for this card. Because the individual cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are the resource and because the cards are so powerful and they're free most of the time, just letting your opponent get a positive card advantage off of Maxi, which means just letting them get a +1 off of it, typically you're going to be using Maxi in a scenario where your opponent activates a monster effect to special summon a card. Remember this with Vanity's Emptiness, where you activate the monster effect to special summon, you can chain Vanity's Emptiness, it stops the effect. In the instance where instead you chain Maxi, Maxi resolves, the monster gets special summoned, and now you get to draw a card. Maxi has replaced itself, so it's basically broken even already. Now your opponent is in this difficult position where they have to choose either one of two options. They either have to choose A, to continue pushing their advantage and try to basically just put themselves in a situation that they're going to let their opponent draw 30 cards and put themselves in a position that they hope is going to win them the game or kill them that turn so that all the 30 cards that they drew didn't matter. Or B, they stop playing entirely because they need to do more special summons to play out the rest of their turn. They pass the turn on a mediocre board, and now their opponent can just straight up kill them on the crackback because Maxx C essentially just allowed them to skip their turn.
Okay, I feel like... Hold on. I'm sorry. I have to ask. I feel like such an idiot right now. You said 30 cards. Are you telling me... I can't tell if trolling because I'm that stupid. Are you telling me it's possible to, like, special summon 30 things in a turn?
It is theoretically possible to special summon even more than that, yes. And sometimes the way to beat Maxx C or getting Maxx C'd, it's very rare, but sometimes the ways to beat this card is to deck your opponent out because it is a mandatory effect for them to draw. So if your deck is capable of special summoning enough times to make them draw their entire deck, you can beat them with their own Maxx C. There are also some cards that form infinite loops that allow them to just keep special summoning the same monsters so that they get Maxx C, they can deck them out that way. It's very rare, but it can happen. But more often than not, what happens is, if the opponent takes what we call the Maxx C challenge, and they try to do as much as they can, letting their opponent draw as many cards as possible, the problem is then, unless they kill the opponent on that turn exactly, the opponent's going to have, 10, 12, 14 cards in hand. And because cards are so individually powerful in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's super easy. I mean, it's not even, it wouldn't even be a challenge for the opponent who drew all these cards off of Maxx C to just kill you on the crackback, because in Yu-Gi-Oh! It is so easy to put 8,000 points of damage on the board, especially as modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Has progressed further. So,
hashtag everything's free.
Everything's free. Everything's free. And so as a result, this is one of, like I said, the most divisive cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because some people see that it's good for the game because it stops these decks that are very special summoning reliant in order to put a check and balance on them. But other people just think it's incredibly toxic because whoever's firing the Maxx C, the opponent in that case is in a lose-lose scenario. They're either going to lose because they just don't keep playing the game and they end on a crappy board, or they lose because the opponent draws like half their deck and they're able to just kill them because they can throw cards at them without caring about card economy at that point, and they're just going to die anyway. So it creates this very toxic negative dynamic, and as such, the card is banned. But it is actually banned only in currently in the TCG. It is legal in Master Duel, our online client, and it is the most played card at a 95% play rate. And it's also legal in the Asian territories in the OCG, and they absolutely despise it.
Okay. Great. All right.
What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
Special summoning is named very poorly. It's the most, that's what I learned. It's about the most unspecial thing. So is it possible to, like, play the game without special summoning, or is it just that baked into the game itself now?
I mean, if you're playing the Mystic Mind deck, you don't care about special summoning at all, because you're just playing Mystic Mind, setting a bunch of trap cards and spell cards, and just telling your opponent that they can't play the game.
See?
So you don't need to special summon.
Just need more people to play like that. Get this, just destroy this. Get this out of here. Okay.
I will say that in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! And similar to some of the cards I've showed you historically, special summoning was considered special in the early days. And as the game evolved, it became the norm. So you would think, the terms could be flipped. But
I special summon my thing. I special summon my thing. I special summon my thing. I special.
That's literally how it is.
Just call it summoning then.
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so.
Okay.
But that is part of the reason why people like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that, again, compared to a game like Magic or other games, you are allowed to do a lot of things, even just from the get-go on your very first turn. And your opponent can also do a lot of things when you pass play to them. Granted, not necessarily are they always fair things, but I think that's one of the appeals of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you are allowed to just play so many crazy cards immediately. You don't have to wait for this like ramp up of resources. You just send it straight from the first turn. And I think that's just like a dopamine rush that a lot of people enjoy.
I honestly thought we're about to say that people like Yu-Gi-Oh! Because everything is special.
I mean, I could have.
You're all special, guys. You're all special.
We are special.
You're all special.
We are special.
Here.
We're special because we still play this game, to be honest. I don't know how we're still around.
Oh my
What do you
God.
think? What do you think of some of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s most toxic cards?
I learned some things about how games go. I still feel like I'm a total idiot with regard to some things like that. So I definitely picked up some stuff. As far as what you guys find toxic, it's like, I guess I get it, because it's very much kind of like stacks cards in Magic, where the game, you just don't get to do certain elements of the game, certain mechanics of the game are shut off, which means you don't get that dopamine rush starting from turn one, casting a million things like you want to. I think I see into the mind of the Yu-Gi-Oh player.
The mystic mind. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for another video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Let's go ahead and shout the patrons for all of their continued support. So shoutouts to Shout1317, Sim00x3, MBT Play Medolce, Moto, Cameron L. Smith, The Synchro Guy, Pony Stark, Dan the Man Hoban, Little Fadeleaf, Draconic, Dylan Rare Hunter, JW11860, Brian Dancer of Class 7, Flannel Daddy, Twinkle Muncher, literally all of the guinea pigs, Cheeks McLapperty, Stolfin Amethyst, Wonder Waffle, MBT canceled by community soon, canceled by all committee soon, canceled by all players soon, Corvain, absolute angriest peacock of the Edison Club, Daniel Howell, and life keeps using solemn judgment on my hopes and dreams. Thank you all so much again for watching, and we will see you next time.